Let me say this clearly and calmly because a lot of people misunderstand this part of relationships. Stopping contact is not a game, it's not manipulation, and it's definitely not punishment. It is a mirror. When you stop contacting a man, you are no longer feeding the dynamic. You are allowing it to reveal itself. You are stepping back so truth can step forward. And truth, whether it's love or indifference, always shows up when silence enters the room. Most people believe that if you stop calling, texting, or checking in, the relationship will simply fade away. But that's not how the human mind works, especially not when emotional attachment has already been formed. So today, we're going to talk in an educational, grounded way about what actually happens in a man's mind and behavior when you stop contacting him. Not from fantasy, not from movies, but from psychology, emotional patterns, and real-life dynamics. When communication suddenly stops, the human mind does not simply move on, it pauses. Silence creates a psychological gap, and that gap demands attention. When you stop contacting a man, the first and most powerful thing that happens is awareness. Not dramatic awareness, not instant realization, but a slow, undeniable recognition that something important has changed. The brain is designed to notice patterns, and when a familiar pattern disappears, it triggers mental alertness. At first, this awareness is subtle. He may not immediately reach out or say anything, but internally, his routine feels different. He checks his phone less intentionally, yet more frequently. He notices that a message didn't come, a call didn't happen, or a name didn't appear on his screen. This absence becomes a mental signal. Silence stands out louder than words ever did. Psychologically, this happens because the brain relies on consistency to feel comfortable. When you were regularly present, your communication became part of his emotional environment. Even if he didn't always respond enthusiastically or prioritize the connection, your presence provided a sense of stability. Once that presence is removed, the brain moves from comfort to curiosity. And curiosity is the doorway to reflection. Reflection does not happen when someone feels in control. Reflection happens when control is interrupted. By stepping back, you unintentionally remove his emotional autopilot. He can no longer assume that you'll always be there, always available, always reaching out. That assumption is what kept him passive. Silence disrupts it. As time passes, awareness turns into mental processing. He starts replaying interactions, not because he wants to, but because the mind fills silence with memory. He remembers the way you spoke to him, the support you gave, the emotional consistency you offered. Things he overlooked when they were freely available now feel heavier in their absence. This is not romantic imagination. It is cognitive contrast. The brain compares then with now, and that comparison sharpens perception. Another important psychological shift occurs here: emotional responsibility. When you were always communicating, he didn't have to question his effort. The relationship energy felt balanced because you were carrying a portion of it for him. Once you stop, the imbalance becomes visible. Silence exposes who was investing and who was coasting. That exposure forces self-evaluation. This is where many people misunderstand the power of silence. They think silence works by making someone miss you emotionally. In reality, it works by making someone notice you psychologically. Missing comes later. Awareness comes first. Without awareness, emotions remain dormant. Silence wakes them up. During this phase, his mind begins asking questions. Not dramatic questions, but quiet ones. Why hasn't she reached out? Is she busy? Is she upset? Did I do something wrong? These questions signal that he is no longer emotionally asleep. He is engaged, even if he hasn't acted yet. Silence has successfully entered his mental space. At the same time, ego begins to participate. Ego is not arrogance, it is identity. When someone stops contacting him, it subtly challenges his sense of importance in that connection. He may not admit it, but the lack of attention feels unfamiliar. Attention had confirmed his role in your life. Its absence now creates uncertainty, and uncertainty forces introspection. This is where emotional maturity, or the lack of it, starts to surface. A man who has emotional awareness will sit with this silence and evaluate his behavior. He will think about whether he has been consistent, present, or appreciative. A man who avoids accountability may distract himself or pretend not to care. But even then, the awareness lingers beneath the surface. Silence also removes external influence. When conversations stop, there are no arguments, no explanations, no emotional negotiations. There is only space. And space is where truth grows. Without your voice guiding the dynamic, he has to rely on his own thoughts and feelings. That independence often leads to clarity. Importantly, this awareness is not something you can force with words. Explaining your value, expressing your hurt, or asking for reassurance often leads to defensiveness. Silence, however, carries no accusation. It simply exists. And because it carries no blame, it is harder to ignore. From an educational perspective, this is known as emotional recalibration. When one stimulus is removed, the mind adjusts its perception of that stimulus's importance. What once felt ordinary now feels noticeable. What felt optional now feels uncertain. That recalibration is essential for genuine understanding. Over time, awareness deepens into realization. He begins to see the role you played not just as a presence, but as an emotional stabilizer. He recognized the comfort you provided, the consistency you offered, and the emotional effort you contributed. These realizations often come too late, but they come because silence made them unavoidable. This is why silence should never be used impulsively or angrily. Its power lies in its calmness. It is not about proving a point. It is about allowing psychological processes to unfold naturally. When you stop contacting a man, you are not withdrawing love, you are withdrawing noise. And without noise, the mind hears truth more clearly. In the end, silence educates both people. It shows him what your absence feels like, and it shows you whether his awareness leads to action. Awareness without action reveals disinterest. Awareness followed by effort reveals value. Either outcome is clarity, and clarity is the real power behind silence. Men and women often experience emotional processing in fundamentally different ways, and understanding this difference is essential to understanding what happens when contact stops. Many men do not fully process emotional loss while they are still inside the emotional environment. As long as communication continues, even if it is inconsistent or unfulfilling, their emotions remain suspended. Distance is what activates emotional understanding for them. When you stop contacting a man, you are not removing emotion, you are creating the conditions for it to finally surface. While communication is ongoing, a man's mind tends to focus on the present moment. He reacts rather than reflects. Messages are answered, conversations happen, and life continues without interruption. There is little reason to sit with feelings because nothing feels threatened. Emotional processing requires contrast, and constant contact removes that contrast. Everything blends into routine. When distance enters the picture, the mind is forced to slow down. Without new messages or interactions to respond to, his attention turns inward. This is when emotional recognition begins. He starts to feel the absence not as an idea, but as an experience. Silence is not empty to the mind, it is active space. And in that space, feelings begin to form shape. This is why many men appear emotionally unaffected at first when communication stops. It is not because they don't care. It is because emotional processing for them often occurs after separation, not during connection. They may seem calm, distracted, or indifferent, but internally the adjustment has begun. Emotional realization does not announce itself. It develops quietly. Distance removes emotional cushioning. When you were present, even minimal interaction provided reassurance. Your availability acted as a safety net. Without it, he has to confront the emotional reality on his own. There is no immediate comfort, no familiar interaction to fall back on. This emotional exposure creates discomfort, and discomfort demands attention. As time passes, the brain begins to associate absence with loss. This is when emotions deepen. He starts to notice how certain moments feel different without you. Conversations with others lack the same familiarity. Daily routines feel less engaging. Even silence in his environment becomes noticeable. These experiences are not dramatic, but they accumulate. Emotional understanding builds through repetition. Distance also removes distraction. When you are available, he could postpone emotional responsibility. He could delay decisions, avoid commitment, or remain uncertain because nothing forced resolution. Silence changes that. Without access to you, unresolved emotions become harder to ignore. The mind naturally seeks closure, and distance creates unanswered questions. This is where emotional depth begins to emerge. He starts revisiting past moments, not just the good ones, but the meaningful ones. Times when you listened, supported him, or made him feel understood. These memories take on greater emotional weight because they are no longer accessible in the present. The mind assigns more value to what feels unavailable. Importantly, this emotional processing is not always conscious. He may not label it as missing you or regretting his actions. Instead, it shows up as restlessness, distraction, or sudden curiosity about what you're doing. These are signs of emotional adjustment. The mind is recalibrating to a new emotional landscape. Distance also shifts power dynamics internally. When communication was constant, emotional leadership often rested with the person who reached out more. Once you step back, that leadership transfers. He now has to decide whether to act or remain passive. This decision point is where true emotion is tested. Avoidance becomes harder when distance is real. Another crucial aspect of distance-based processing is accountability. Without ongoing conversation, he cannot rely on explanations or justifications. He has to sit with his own behavior and its consequences. This solitude creates a clearer view of how he showed up or failed to show up in the connection. For some men, this leads to growth. For others, it reveals avoidance. Distance also allows emotions to mature. Immediate reactions fade, and deeper feelings have space to rise. Surface-level attraction gives way to appreciation or regret. Emotional clarity takes time, and silence provides that time. This is why attempts to force emotional responses through conversation often fail. There is no room for natural development. It is also important to understand that distance does not guarantee emotional return. Emotional processing leads to truth, not outcomes. For some men, distance confirms the value of the connection and motivates effort. For others, it reveals that the attachment was shallow. Both results are honest. Silence does not manipulate emotion, it reveals it. From an educational perspective, this explains why many men reconnect only after a period of no contact. It is not sudden desire. It is delayed emotional processing. The distance allowed feelings to surface that were suppressed by routine and availability. By the time they reach out, they are responding to emotions they have finally recognized. At the same time, distance benefits you as well. While he processes emotionally, you regain clarity. Without constant communication, your own nervous system settles. You begin to evaluate the connection more objectively. Distance balances emotional investment on both sides. Ultimately, men process loss through distance because distance removes emotional shortcuts. It eliminates familiarity, convenience, and assumption. What remains is truth, and truth, whether it leads to action or acceptance, is the foundation of emotional understanding. When you stop contacting a man, you are not walking away from emotion. You are giving it the space it needs to exist honestly. When you are constantly present in someone's life, your value can quietly become invisible, not because it isn't real, but because it is always available. Human psychology does something interesting with consistency. It stops noticing it. When you stop contacting a man, one of the most significant shifts that happens is the restoration of your perceived value, not through demand, not through explanation, but through absence. Value is not created by effort alone. It is recognized through contrast. When you were always reaching out, always checking in, always emotionally accessible, your presence blended into the background of his life. It became expected rather than appreciated. This does not mean he didn't benefit from you. It means he no longer consciously acknowledged the benefit. Availability over time can be mistaken for permanence. When you step back, that assumption collapses. The mind no longer operates on "she'll be there." It shifts to "she's not here." That change is powerful. Absence forces reevaluation. What once felt ordinary now feels significant. What felt guaranteed now feels uncertain. And uncertainty is what restores attention. Psychologically, boundaries signal self-worth. When you stop contacting him, you are not withholding affection. You are demonstrating self-respect. You are showing that your time, energy, and emotional availability are not limitless. This shift is often felt immediately, even if it is not acknowledged. Respect grows where boundaries exist. Your absence also changes the emotional economy of the relationship. When you were giving more than you were receiving, the balance was uneven. Over time, this imbalance lowers perceived value, not because you are worth less, but because the exchange feels effortless to him. Effort is what signals importance. When effort is no longer required, importance fades from conscious awareness. By removing yourself from constant contact, you reintroduce effort as a requirement. If he wants access to you, he must initiate. If he values connection, he must act. This rebalancing restores your position emotionally. You are no longer the one maintaining the connection alone. You are someone who can be lost. Another critical aspect of restored value is mystery. Constant communication removes curiosity. When everything is shared, explained, and accessible, there is nothing left for the mind to wonder about. When you step back, curiosity returns. He begins to wonder what you're doing, how you're feeling, and whether he still matters to you. Curiosity fuels interest, and interest fuels value. Silence also separates your worth from your effort. Many people unintentionally tie their value to how much they give. When you stop contacting him, you detach your worth from constant contribution. You are valuable not because you chase, but because you exist. This distinction is subtle, but psychologically impactful. As your absence continues, he starts to notice the roles you fill: emotional support, encouragement, understanding, presence. These things were easy to overlook when they were always there. Without them, emotional gaps appear. Conversations feel different. Emotional comfort feels reduced. These gaps highlight the value you added, not through words, but through experience. Importantly, restored value is not about making someone anxious or insecure. It is about allowing natural consequences to take place. When someone has access to something meaningful without responsibility, the mind devalues it. When access is limited by boundaries, the mind reassesses its importance. This is also where respect deepens. A person who respects themselves enough to step back when their effort is not matched sends a powerful message: I know what I bring and I don't need to convince you of it. That message resonates at a deeper level than pleading or explaining ever could. Restored value also changes how he perceives future interaction. If he does reach out, the dynamic is different. He is no longer responding to your availability. He is responding to your absence. That shift changes the emotional tone of the connection. Conversations carry more intention. Actions carry more weight. At the same time, your internal value strengthens. Stepping back forces you to confront your own attachment patterns. You begin to recognize that your worth does not depend on his attention. This inner shift often happens before any external response. And that inner shift is what makes restored value sustainable. From an educational perspective, perceived value increases when scarcity meets significance. You are not scarce because you disappear. You are scarce because you choose where your energy goes. That choice signals discernment, and discernment signals high value. He truly values you. Your absence will prompt him to step up, not because he is afraid of losing you, but because he recognizes what your presence added to his life. If he does not, your restored value protects you from continuing to invest where you are not appreciated. In the end, stopping contact does not reduce your worth, it reveals it. It removes the noise of overgiving and replaces it with clarity. Whether he responds or not, your value is no longer hidden behind effort. It stands on its own, visible, intact, and undeniable. When communication stops, words disappear and behavior takes their place. This is where the most honest information appears. When you stop contacting a man, you remove the space for promises, explanations, and emotional talk. What remains is action, and action, or the lack of it, reveals intent more clearly than anything he could say. As long as you are initiating contact, it is difficult to measure his true level of interest. Your effort can mask his passivity. Conversations continue, connection feels alive, and hope stays present, not because both people are equally invested, but because one person is carrying momentum. Silence removes that momentum and exposes the truth beneath it. At first, he may notice the absence and do nothing. This pause is important. It shows how comfortable he is without the connection and how motivated he is to maintain it. A man who values you does not remain passive for long. Discomfort pushes him to act. He reaches out not to fill silence, but to restore connection. If he does reach out, the way he does it matters. Intent shows in consistency, effort, and clarity. A genuine response involves checking in, expressing interest, and making plans to reconnect. It is not vague, it is not casual, it carries direction. This kind of action signals emotional investment. On the other hand, minimal effort reveals minimal intention. A brief message without follow-up, sporadic check-ins, or casual curiosity without commitment shows that the silence did not awaken priority. It only triggered momentary awareness. This distinction is crucial. Interest that fades quickly after silence is not interest rooted in value. Another revealing factor is timing. A man who truly cares does not wait indefinitely. He may take time to process, but eventually the discomfort of absence outweighs his hesitation. Delay can indicate fear or immaturity, but prolonged inaction indicates lack of intention. Silence clarifies this without confrontation. Silence also reveals emotional capacity. Some men feel but do not act. When contact stops, their emotions may surface, but if they lack the capacity to communicate or take responsibility, those emotions remain internal. This is not something you can fix with effort. His response or non-response shows you what he is capable of offering. Importantly, silence removes confusion created by mixed signals. When someone says they care but does not show it, confusion thrives. Silence cuts through that. If he cares, he shows up. If he doesn't, he disappears. This clarity is uncomfortable, but it is honest. Another truth revealed through silence is priority. People make time for what matters. When you are no longer available by default, he has to choose whether to invest time and energy. If he consistently chooses other things over reconnecting, that choice speaks louder than any explanation. Silence also exposes intention toward the future. A man interested in building something will act with purpose. He will seek resolution, conversation, and clarity. A man interested only in convenience will reappear when it suits him and disappear when it doesn't. Patterns emerge quickly when you stop engaging. From an educational standpoint, behavior under pressure reveals motivation. Silence creates pressure, not dramatic pressure, but emotional pressure. It forces a decision, act or let go. Choice he makes is not accidental. It reflects his true desire. Silence also protects you from self-deception. When communication continues, it is easy to interpret potential, imagine change, or hold on to hope. Silence removes potential and replaces it with reality. Reality may be disappointing, but it is also freeing. If he steps up, you gain confirmation that the connection has substance. If he doesn't, you gain confirmation that your energy is better invested elsewhere. Either outcome moves you forward. Silence does not leave you stuck. It releases you from uncertainty. Another important aspect is emotional accountability. If he wants you back in his life, he must take responsibility for his absence, inconsistency, or lack of effort. Silence demands ownership. There is no continuation without acknowledgement. This sets a healthier foundation if reconnection happens. At the same time, silence reveals your own boundaries. By not chasing, not reminding, and not rescuing the connection, you reinforce your self-respect. You allow his behavior to speak for itself, and you listen to it without excuses. In the end, silence is not a strategy, it is a filter. It filters out indecision, half-effort, and emotional unavailability. What passes through is genuine interest. What disappears was never solid to begin with. When you stop contacting a man, you don't lose him, you discover him. You discover what he truly wants, what he is willing to do, and what he is capable of offering. And that knowledge is more valuable than any reassurance words could ever give.